All right. Application window, Zoom meeting.
See, now you can.
Yeah, I can hear you, but I cannot hear myself. Okay.
When you share your screen, I will share it on.
Wait. I will have to arrange my desktop again. So I arranged it in a manner for the OBS thing. So can you hear me? Can you see my screen?
Yes, very clearly. Then I can speak.
Okay, I'll have to mute you. How do I mute you?
I mute.
Okay. Uh, like I can actually not see my screen myself. But there's one thing.
You cannot
Wait.
screen.
Okay, Shiraz, can you see my screen properly? Like everything. PowerPoint.
Yes,
Can you see this PowerPoint presentation?
yes,
Can you see this?
yes.
Like this is
I can
JWT.io.
see it.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so you can now start presenting.
All right. So you start presenting, right? Your thing, basic thing.
So we are starting with you now.
Okay, not with me. All right. Just let me set up. Okay.
Okay,
All right.
okay.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello everyone. Uh, Finally, we are starting with the null meeting for this month. Hello everyone. So I'll do a little introduction to our null community, and then Faiz will join, and he'll actually present a session about JWT 101 and JWT security. So null is an open security community. Uh, it is gender neutral, so that's it doesn't matter if you're a boy or girl or anyone. We are throughout India, and now we are like this. These are old slides, but there are um, chapters of null all over the world now. We are completely open source, and anyone can join us. We talk about security and uh, different
Shiraz.
aspects of. Yeah.
By the way,
Yes.
what we have to do is we have to get the people in, wait for them to come in online, and then you do it when they are here.
Okay.
Okay, so send them the link first.
I- Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll start in a minute. People are joining in. That's why we are waiting. Hello, everyone. So um, I'm going to do a little quick introduction to null community, and then we'll start with Faiz Vice session. Um, so if you all are new here, null is an open security community. First of all, it's gender neutral, so anyone can join in. If you are interested in security, you can just come right in and we'll other than that, our community, we have a global community of security experts around the world. So we are not just these are old slides, but this is India's most active security community, and it's free to join. This community is for security ninjas, security administrators, security managers, penetration testers, and generally people who are concerned with the security or want to learn about different techniques, how security can be compromised. So it is for both people on the blue team and the red team. What do we do? This is just a joke. We do security all the time. That's what it means. Um, we have monthly meetups every month. Generally, these are physical meetups, but because of the lockdown, we are doing them virtually. So you can come along and meet like-minded people here. We have three different types of sessions. We have Hamla sessions. These are basically those sessions where we talk about red teaming and the stuff where we try and go and hack something. These are sort of workshops about doing a practical red team attack. Then we have Bachao sessions. These are specifically towards blue teams where we talk about securing things. Instead of in red team, we are talking about how we can make our infrastructure secure, or if we are using some softwares, then how we can put in firewalls and stuff. These are the workshops where we talk about blue teams. Then we have Pulia sessions. These Pulia sessions are workshops, 3 hour, 4 hour workshops, where we take up a topic and then we give anyone who's experienced with that topic, they do basically a workshop about that topic. For example, if I am good with red teaming, then I can take a workshop about red teaming, or specifically if I'm talking about UTMs or firewalls. That's how we do these. That we take up a topic and then we talk about them as a workshop, and this is all hands on. We also have study groups where we get like the people who are interested in similar topics like malware reversing or penetration testing. Then these study groups have leaders who actually help students to learn and grasp those concepts. Though they are already working in these fields, so they know what we can take advantage of, and we don't have to do our own research when, and they can just guide us straight. Then Null, this is not related to Null community, but Null also have a conference. You might have heard of NullCon, and here all of us get together, and this is the biggest conference of India, the cybersecurity conference of India. Null also have a mailing list if you want to join in. You can just go over this link and join in and get in the discussion. What is the benefit if you join Null community? You learn a lot, and this is one of the way you can get exposure to security industry. And if you are a student especially, and you don't know a lot of people in security, you can come and get more exposure toward like-minded people and increase your network that way, and get your if you do a lot of contribution, you can get your name out there in the security community. um, how can you be a part of Null? Join the mailing list and attend our meetups regularly. And if you are willing, then take up a session, speaker session, and talk about what you are working on. Thank you. So now I'll give the screen over to Faiz Bhai, and he'll talk about JWT and its security.
Right. Hey guys, sorry for the delay. Uh, I'll just share my screen right now. So I hope my screen is being shared. Okay. So hello guys. So in this session, I'm going to talk about JWT 101, which is actually pronounced like JOT 101. So the specification says that JWT is pronounced as JOT, but I personally like the JWT pronunciation more, so I'll stick to that throughout the session. So who am I? My name is Faiz Mohammad Khan. I am a DevSecOps professional. You can catch me on Twitter at that thing, and I'm available on that website. So you can find other details about me on that website. So yeah, so we are going to talk about JWT 101. You can actually put your questions on the YouTube chat because I'm actually seeing them. So if you have something, you just put it over there. When I have the time, I'll just go over there and answer those questions as well. So the first thing that we should know before we deal with JWT is identity management. So if you do not know about identity management deal is a process which deals with identifying, authenticating, and authorizing people. But there's one thing that is always missing in the definition is accounting as well. So I'll talk about these things. So in identity management, there are four things. The first thing is identity, in which you actually talk about who you are. So when you talk about identity, it's about your personal details like your name, your username, or any other thing that can identify you. The second thing is authentication. Authentication is something which is a process in which you prove you are who you say you are. And the next thing is authorization, in which you actually authorization is implemented by the system itself, and it allows for allowed actions that you can do for the identity you are taking in. And the last part is accounting, in which you actually in which the history of your action is stored for that corresponding identity. So why I have mentioned this in this sense is that on the web, when you talk about the web, you can actually take on multiple identities. You might have multiple accounts, multiple things, and other things as well. So this is why I'm saying that when you deal with IDM on the web or somewhere else, the identity part, you actually say you who you are. So identity deals with who you say you are. So I am saying who you say you are because the thing is, whenever you go to facebook.com or any other place, it's you who actually define your identity and publish it on that server and tell it to that server, some other people as well. The second thing is authentication. So identity normally deals with details about yourself. So like your name, your description, and if you look at your Twitter profile, it's the description you have, your handler, your name, and phone number, other things as well. But those are not identity that is shown to everyone else as well. The second thing is authentication. So when you have some identity, normally you put up some credentials or something that allows you to prove that you are that identity. So authentication is used somewhere in the future after you have created your identity to actually prove that you are that identity. Authorization is implemented by the other party, and it's normally something that deals with authorizing the actions or allowed actions that you're allowed to do for the identity you are assuming. And again, on the server, accounting is a process in which you actually take a log of all the things that are related to the identity or all the actions that have been for that identity. So for a lot of regulation purposes as well. Now, when we start with identity, let's take an example of a client and server architecture. So when you want to create an identity or create a virtual identity, uh, you can use a client, which can be your browser or your postman or an API. Shiraz, can you tell me if you can see my cursor?
Yes, I can see it. Cursor.
Mouse, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So on the client can be any of these things. It can be another API as well. And the server can be the web server or the API. So normally an identity is created using a signer form, and signer form such like this one. So where you actually tell what's your first name, what's your last name, what would be the email be, and what will be the credentials for this account. So normally when you send it to a server, you actually receive a confirmation, and that's it. Like nothing happens after that. So now when you want to use that identity, you have to authenticate. So the second process that happens is from the client, you have to send a request to the server using the authentication factors, which the server can validate. If it validates the authenticity of those factors, it will retrieve that identity for you. So authentication factors are normally in are of three subcategories. One, something you know, something you are, and something you have. So the example of something you know is password and PIN. So on your mobile phones, something you know can be a pattern, can be a PIN, can be a password, or can be any other thing that you know. Some security factors like security quotients, they are also authentication factors, but they are secondary authentication factors. Something you are can be biometrics, so your fingerprints, your eye scan, your face scan, or something like that. Something you have is something that you physically possess. So SIM cards, which are in your mobile, allows you to receive OTPs. You have tokens. Tokens are of different forms as well. In fact, JWT, what we are talking about, is also a token. Now, these are the three things which allows you to authenticate. So when we are talking about the authentication in the first phase, normally when you want to authenticate, you will send one of these authentication factors to the server for the server to validate. Okay, these things are sent as a proof to the server so that the server can validate you are who you say you are. So let's assume that you send some credentials using a username and password form. When you send it to the server validates it, and then from a database, it retrieves it. And I forgot one thing that when you're signing up, it saves your virtual identity in a database. Again, I'm saying virtual identity is because that might not be the same identity that you normally take during your normal sessions. Because the thing is, like, you know, as well, like a lot of people have fake accounts, so nobody's actually coming and see that your real identity is the identity that you have on the server. So now this thing retrieves an identity and it generates a token. So I'll show you one thing. I think, yeah, I can show you an example. So what happens is that when you send a credential to a server, when you're dealing with this client and server architecture, normally your client is on a different IP address and server is on a different IP address. Now my client's IP address can change. A lot of different things can change as well. So whenever I'm having multiple requests, it's very hard for the server to identify the client. Another thing is that once I have authenticated, the server cannot keep track of the client because it will have to have another database which will stores the client IP address. So what I'm trying to say in simpler terms, that if I meet someone in person, so for example, if I met Shiraz in person for the first time, I authenticated myself to Shiraz, but now Shiraz has a pointer on me that I am who I say I am. So he will know unless I leave and I come back again. And actually, he will know me after I come back as well. But this is not the case with client and server because the client can change all the time. You can have a browser, or you can be using your computer, or you can be using your mobile phone, or you can be using multiple devices. So the things that identify your client can change all the time, so that the server cannot like persistently authenticate you throughout the session. So what happens in the first phase, when you use your credentials to authenticate, the server generates a token and it sends it to the client. So the token is another form of authentication, which is a token based authentication. Then whenever you send a new request, you send this request in the token and the server validates that token and authenticates you. So this saves you the effort of sending your username and password in every request. Rather, you send a token which your browser or your mobile device, everything they do it automatically, so you don't have to do it. But in fact, all your requests that you send to the server are authenticated. The first request is authenticated with using any of these factors. Like the subsequent requests are normally authenticated using a token. So if you know about session tokens from PHP or something like that, you know that, okay, I'll just get to it. What is a token? So a token is anything that you have. So if you say like I do not want to go to the literal meaning of token. So when you talk about token, the token here can be anything that the server can send to the client to actually identify that specific line. So normally you have different forms of token, which I'll get back to in one point. So let me finish this first and I'll get to it in a few minutes, Anil. So what happens, back to the main thing, that when your client sends the authentication fact to the server, which can be any of these things, the server will generate a token. It can generate multiple things. It can generate a hash value. It can generate any kind of thing that you send to the client, and the client can send it back to you, and you remember that. One real life example is that when you go to a mobile service station, they give you a receipt. So whenever you go in, there's a queue. So they give you a token which gives you a queue number. So the token can say that your serial number or your queue number is like 35. So you know that you have it, and then you wait it till the queue reaches the 35 number. And when they call the 35 number person, you can just go and show the token which says that you are on the position 35. Yeah, OTP is also a token, kind of a token. So yeah, but OTP, well, I do not want to go deep dive into it because these jargons are like they have a specific meaning, but when you use it online, everyone does not go and get the like Oxford dictionary meaning of that. So when you go online and you see a lot of places, people will refer to token as a lot of places. People will refer to token as a lot of different things. So just understand one thing, that server gives you a thing which can be any text or any value that you save on your browser and send it back. So that's a token for all your subsequent requests, right? So normally a token is stored on a cookie or on the local storage. So these happens if you're working with a browser. Otherwise, if you're working as Postman or API, then it's on you to store this token somewhere and send this token back to the server in subsequent requests. So clear so far? Anything anyone wants to ask so far? All right, I'll take that as a no. Okay. Uh, that's that. Now, the server can send multiple things as well. The server can send a token or a verified identity or any data thing as well. So one thing I would like to talk about in these two diagrams, that whenever the client sends something, I'm actually marking that as interested. And whenever there's an identity sent by the server to the client, it's verified, because the server is you can consider the server as a source of truth in most cases, not in all cases, like, but in most cases you can consider server as a source of truth. But when you're taking a client, you cannot trust the data that the client sends or the trust the token that the client sends. So normally you have to validate that. So what happens, so I'll discuss that in specific scenarios and specific things when we are talking about that. So understand one thing from the top, that when you are trying to create an identity, use the client to sign up on the server. When you sign up on the server and if it's successful, the server saves your virtual identity, and it records all the details that it wants to record. Normally, some applications record more than needed data. Some applications they record only the data that is necessary, and they send back the confirmation. Now, if you want to authenticate to the server, then you'll have to use any of the authentication factors to the server. The server will validate the authentication factors using the stored credentials or anything on the database, compare them, and if it works, then it generates a new token and sends it to the client. Now the client will, it's the client's responsibility to save it somewhere. Normally the server, if you're directly working with the server rather than a front end like React or something like that, then they can have like use a set cookie instruction or something like that, so that these things are automatically stored in the client. Local storage is a bit hard to do it, and you need to have like extra libraries for that. So you will have to implement client side logic to actually save something on the local storage, while cookies are way simpler to do that as well. One more thing about cookies and local storage is that whenever you send the request back to the server, the cookie is automatically added back to the request by the browser and it's sent to the server. For local storage, you might have to write some extra code. Now, what we have discussed so far is two ways of authentication. So the first thing is using any of the authentication factors, then using the token, you send it to the server validates it using some means that it has, and then it sends back the request. Now, when we talk about authorization, you do not actually send authorization through these channels. Normally, what happens is that authorization is implemented in the client and in the server. So normally you write a code in the server. So the server takes in your virtual identity. It finds factors. So for example, if you have some roles, you might have a role which is for admin or a local user. So server sees that if your role is an admin or a local user, or if you are friends with someone, or if you are other things as well, then depending on that logic, server allows you to access some resources or doesn't allow you to access some resources. So depending on your token, if it validates and if your identity has been authorized to do something, you can do that on the server. The authorization on the client is for generally for UI UX purposes, because most of the validation and every crisp logic that you want to implement, you will implement on the server, and you can send that identity back to the client. Now, in the client, this client can also use that identity to authorize few things just for UI UX purposes. So, for example, if you are not an admin, the client can implement logic to not render elements that are specific to the admin. For example, if you have a post page in which admin has a form in which he can like add a new user or something like that, my React framework or my Svelte framework or my Angular framework will not render that depending on this thing. One more thing about the authorization on client that I normally use it for is one more thing that what happens if you authorize on the client, it saves you a lot of processing power to do it again on the server. So normally I implement most of my validations here, but those validations are all also validated on the server. But client stops. Okay, if the thing that we do not want to do, and if it's unvalidated on the client itself, so you will not be sending requests to the server. So when you send a request to the server will have to process it again. But if you implement authorization on the client itself, then you reduce the number of requests that are sent to the server. So if it's done on the client, then the client will automatically tell you that it's an invalid request or something like that. Or if you are not an admin user, it will not show you the admin panels and people will not click on those buttons as well. So this saves a lot of computing power on the server and transfers it to the client. So clear so far?
Yes, sir. Very simple.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the YouTube chat, so I'm seeing if someone says something or not. All right, nobody's saying anything, so I'll just move on. So normally the strategies that we have to implement this kind of structures are as follows. So sessions, you guys might have like if you have done some web development, then sessions are the most common things that you see. And there are also API keys, and there's also JSON web token, which you're talking about here. So when you talk about sessions, sessions are normally present everywhere. So I think Shiraz, you might have also worked with sessions as well, and a lot of other people might have worked with sessions. So when I talk about JSON web tokens, it's an alternative to sessions. So to talk about the difference, what I will do is I will explain how the architecture of a session works, and then I'll see how it compares to JSON Web Tokens and other things as well. And to be honest, I'll skip API keys because we have so many things to talk about as well. So now going back here, when I convert this kind of architecture into something related to sessions, then we have this thing that the architecture for sessions looks in this way. So now the differences that we have, okay, I'll just go back from the top. So when you're trying to create an identity, you do it in the normal way. It saves the virtual identity. Now, when you are using authentication, using the authentication factors, when you send it to the server, it verifies those credentials and it generates a session ID or session something and sends it back to the client. Now, when you are that client, you just send back, okay, I actually didn't, I think I copied this image back here rather than the sessions one. So when I upload this PPT online, I'll just fix this thing. So just bear with me that here you just send your authentication factors. The thing that you get back is a session ID, which you store in your cookie. Now, when you have a client and when you send subsequent request, these this session token is sent to the server. So when the server retrieves that session token, okay, there's one more thing that I forgot here as well. So when the server generates the token, it saves it in the backend database. So the thing is, there will be no two databases now, or two tables now. One table is to save the identity along with credentials, and the other thing is for tokens. Now, this other table will create a thing that for this session ID or this session token has been granted to this identity. So when I come back with the session token, my server will look into the database. It will see if that is a valid token. If it's a valid token, it will extract the identity which is associated with that token, and it will send back that virtual identity. And then the server will authorize the request depending on that virtual identity, and it will respond it back and try to verify. Okay, it will respond back with the verified identity, and the other things will happen on the client. So yes, Patrick, actually you can put your questions at any time on the chat. Whenever I'm free, I will reply to those. So just don't wait for me to ask you what your question is. Just put your questions on the chat and I'll try to reply whenever I can. So Patrick, you can put your questions over there and I'll get back to that. All right. So this is a session based thing. Now, the problem with this session based architecture is that right now we are using one server and one database. So when you look at two things, one is RESTful API and one is microservices architecture, you will find few things which are not really oriented for sessions. So if you have heard about RESTful APIs, RESTful API, okay, REST is short for representational state transfer. So it has a lot of things which it tells in the official RFC or in the official document, which you can find here. So in the document, it mentions a protocol or it mentions a set of things that you can do to make your web services more scalable. One of the things which is found in the section 5.1.3 for stateless is that we next add a constraint to the client server interaction. Communication must be stateless in nature, as in the client stateless server style, such that this is the important point, such that each request from client to server must contain all of the information necessary to understand the request and cannot take advantage of any stored context on the server. Now, if we go back to the session kind of thing, then whenever we send a token to the server, what happens is that there's a different storage on the server which has that token associated with a virtual identity. So whenever we are sending a token, our server is actually taking advantage of that token and
That's why we can't hear you.
hello, Shiraz. Yeah,
Yes,
I know something happened. So where did you miss me?
you were talking about from the start, I guess.
Like from
From
here?
stateless. Yeah,
Okay, my computer froze for a second. So yeah.
yeah.
So I'm going
Not
back from the top.
Okay.
So from the top, uh, REST is short for representational state transfer. If you have encountered RESTful APIs, so they follow a specification which you can find here. So according to the specification, it mentions a lot of constraints. And if you follow those constraints in a client server architecture, you can make your server more scalable or your applications more scalable. So one of the constraints is in section 5.1.3. Uh, the main constraint starts from here, such that each request from client to server must contain all of the information necessary to understand the request. So, which means that when your client sends a request to the server, the client should contain all of the necessary information that the client transfer to the server, and server processes that thing, and cannot take advantage of any stored context on the server. So what this says is, for a RESTful API, your client should send all the data necessary for the server. Okay, the client should send data to the server, in which when you send the data, the server should not take advantages of any stored context. This allows for stateless applications in one manner. Okay, I'll just explain it again. So, for example, in sessions, I have a session ID. This session ID corresponds to a table stored on my data on the database of my client. Oh, sorry, on the server. In this database, it will have a session ID corresponding to a virtual identity. So when my client sends a token, a session token or session cookie to my server, the server will first validate that session cookie or session token, and then it will verify that and then retrieve the virtual identity corresponding to that thing. So what my client is doing is it taking advantage of a database which is on my server, which is to map session IDs with virtual identities. Now, this is not something that complies to my representational state transfer. Our JSON Web Tokens, they actually do the same thing. So we'll discuss like what are the things which actually comply to this thing. So when you want to create a RESTful API, your sessions are a no-go. Now, other thing is a microservices architecture. So I have converted this thing to a microservices architecture. So how many of you are comfortable with microservices architecture? Okay, so Patrick has this question. Can I implement JWT in my OAuth framework? So the thing is, OAuth internally can use JWT. So OAuth uses JWT. You do not have to implement. OAuth itself has JWT inside, but it has multiple other options as well. So in your OAuth framework, you can choose if you want to work with JWT or if you want to work with any other uh, token thing, which I do not know because I have worked with JWT. So I do not know like what are the other things that the OAuth framework supports, but it can support the JWT thing. Now coming back to the microservices architecture, how many of you are not comfortable with what microservices are? So if you're comfortable, then I'll go back to the point. If you're not comfortable, I'll just give you a brief overview. Shiraz, are you comfortable with microservices?
Yes, a little bit.
Okay, I'll just continue with the brief overview. If that's not clear for you, you guys can put that in the YouTube comments. Whenever I see that comment, I'll go back and try to explain it again. So normally
Okay.
we have a server here and we have a single database here. This is something which represents a monolithic architecture. In a microservices, you have multiple services which are running as different processes, and they are taking care of different. Okay, uh, I think I should have had a diagram here which compares this thing. I do not have it, so I'll just try to virtually explain it. So here, what I've done is I have removed my server and replaced it with three things. When I talk about three things, all the things in the green are running as their own executable files. So normally what happens is that when you have a server, you have multiple classes, you have multiple modules, you have multiple libraries, and etc. etc. So what happens is that you have a single executable file from which you are executing all your code. Now, what happens in a microservices architecture at the core and basic level, all your code and all your modules are normally, you can think, are running as different executable processes. So this is a base thing in microservices. So the benefit of this thing happens is that when your application crashes, that only okay, when there is a problem in the code, only the executable corresponding to that code crashes. So what happens if there's a code error in this in anywhere in this server, and if there's a syntax error or something, and whenever the code encounters that thing, the whole server crashes because everything is part of a single executable. So whenever there is a crash, the whole executable crashes and the whole server crashes. In a microservices architecture, when you have multiple executable files running as multiple services which are executing parts of your code, if one thing crash, only that thing crashes. So that is the base thing. And I think there's a very good definition by Martin Fowler. So you can go to Chrome, you can write Martin Fowler microservices. Okay, this is not the thing that I was looking for. Okay, so there's a definition by Martin Fowler. So these are the two guys that you should blame for microservices. So uh, these two guys, they came up with the concept of microservices. People were deploying it. These two guys, they actually gave it a more better form, and they actually defined how these things should work. So the first thing it says, it should work as a suite of small services, everything running in its own process, and they are built around business capabilities. So when you do this, they have a bare minimum of centralized management, but I'll skip that. The thing that I want to talk about here is they are built around business complex capabilities, which gives rise to another thing, which is bounded context. So what I've done is this server might have had a lot of code. One part of that code was interacting with the DB, which contained my users table, which had the users data and the identity stored and the credentials over there. And the second thing it has is the for my sessions, it has a table for my session IDs, which corresponds to virtual identities. Now, in my microservices architecture, this part of the code will be taken care of a different executable file. And you can assume that there's microservice 2 and microservice 3, which are taking care of other parts. The thing that you have to take care when you're dividing this is bounded context. So the thing is, if you are dealing with users, all of that code should be in this user microservices. If I have a products microservices, all of the code related to products should be in that microservices. If I have an invoice microservices, all the code that is related to invoices should be in that microservices. So from that point of thing, if I have a user microservice, all the data that is related with users, okay, all the things, all the operations that you want to perform on the users, or that means all the authentication part, all the what do you say, identity part, and everything else, and the including the generation of tokens should be taken care of user service. So this user service has a database. There's one more thing in microservices architecture, that you should have one database for each table. So if I have a users database which is storing the identity in this database, or in this particular database which has multiple tables, my second microservice should not be allowed to communicate directly with that microservices, directly with that database. If my second microservice wants to interact with this database, it should communicate with this user service, and that should happen over there. So in short, for our purpose, if we have a microservices architecture, we have different microservices. All the data, all the requests are routed to these microservices using an API gateway. All the sign up based things and sign in or authentication based thing should be a part of the user service, and should be it should use this database for that authentication. Now, other microservices should not be allowed to interact directly with this DB. So is that a bit comfortable? I have a code for a lot of microservices. Actually, I am in process of writing a YouTube series for everything related to microservices, including writing RESTful APIs, the communication and authentication and everything else as well. So if you wait for few days, then like few weeks, like I will be releasing each part in a week. So I'll post it on my Twitter handle. So if you follow me on this Twitter, you'll have that, and if I have the option, I'll put it on the null thing as well, on the null Bhopal page as well, or WhatsApp group. So I will give you everything. I'll give you proper tutorials for how microservices work. How do you actually write RESTful APIs, including all the sections in that. But that's part of something else, not right now.
Faiz
So
bhai, I have a question.
yeah,
Uh, when we are talking about multiple microservices talking to just one DB, right? So,
yeah,
what are the chances of, like, if we have a lot of traffic on these microservices and
yeah,
they are authenticating their users from this one DB? If this one DB goes down, isn't that one point of failure for
yeah.
the whole
That's the problem.
infrastructure?
Yeah, exactly. So sessions are not suitable for microservices. So I'm trying to explain the same point here. That is one point that why this kind of architecture is not good for microservices. So I'll just talk about it. So JWT solves that problem, and here we are going to talk about that as well. That how JWT solves that problem, but that will be in the end slide, because the thing with microservices is that you will have to understand a lot of things to actually understand why that is being done. So I'll not include a lot of that thing in this discussion, but if we have time by the end of this thing, I'll entertain all the questions and I'll explain all that as well. So currently, adding to your point, the same thing happens here, that whenever I'm authenticating, it's dealing with this service. But when I want to do authorization, okay, so coming back from the top, like just forget everything. I have an identity thing. I sign up, my sign up request goes to an API gateway. It looks at that I'm trying to do the sign up thing, and it sends it to the user microservice. My user microservice sends the virtual identity here, and it gives me a confirmation. Now, when I'm doing the first kind of authentication, my client sends a request to the API gateway that it wants to authenticate. Uh, I have removed everything here because it was a very ugly diagram. So let's still assume that these two microservices are here as well. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm just showing this one part. So what happens when I do send an authentication request using the authentication factors, it goes to my API gateway. It sends that request to the user service, and user service verifies my credentials and it generates a token. Okay, this thing should be here. So the user service generates a token, and this token is passed back to the client. Now, for the session based architecture, I'm sending my session ID here, and let's assume that I've created a new table here in my DB, which is for sessions ID. Now the problem arises that when I send subsequent requests to functionalities that are being offered by other microservices. For example, I want to do something random, or like I want to view a page or I want to access the product's functionality. So when I do that, my client will send this request to the API gateway. Yeah, I will do it afterwards. I am focusing on microservices right now, so I'll do the AWS part afterwards. But let's not talk about that thing. Just ask these questions at the end of the session. Right now, let's focus on this thing. So what happens here is that when I send a request, that is not to be directed to the user service, and that has to be directed to microservice 2. When I send this request to microservice 2, now my microservice 2 is not allowed to access this database. So how will it authenticate now? The one thing it can do is it can go back to the user service and try to do that. But that's a very, very bad approach, as Shiraz pointed out. So the thing is, the session based thing is a bad idea. So that's why people came up with two things. One is an API keys. So normally you send an API key to work with a microservice with a RESTful API. But again, when you use API keys, they are not RESTful APIs, because everything again is being stored on the server. So now comes JWT or JOT. So what JOT does is, I will call it JWT because I like JWT more. So JWT is a compact URL safe means of representing claims to be transferred between two parties. So what it normally says, it is a method or it's a process in which you can send claims. Now, when I'm talking about identity and when I'm trying to authenticate, I'm claiming to be an identity and I'm providing factors that I am this identity and I'm proving that to you. When I send a token, I'm just claiming to be an identity because I do not have the thing. So if we look at this definition and we look at the third part where we are claiming to be an identity using a token, JWT sits really well. So now here it can be used to transfer, mean it is a way of representing claims between any of the two things. Currently, we are talking about a client and server architecture. Again, back to the thing, if people would have forgotten. So client can be browser, Postman, or it can be another API as well. And this can be a server. So client can be another microservice trying to connect to this service as well. So that's a different thing. Now, when I come back here, uh, this is something that I have mentioned here. So when you're claiming to be an identity, it implements certain cryptographic techniques uh, to actually, which makes it possible to verify claims that we will be discussing here. So it's described by RFC 7519. So that's the last RFC here, which describes everything on how you work with JWT. So all of the thing that I've come up with here and all of the examples that I've come up with here, I have just read this thing and it gives you the complete thing as well. So now, uh, JWT is a, like, what do you say? It's a way of representing claims. It gives you a way. It actually doesn't. When you go to this official documentation as well, the thing what they have done in JWT is they have defined both JWE and JWS. So if I increase the font, so wherever you see JWT, the official documentation, it defines different thing for JWS and JWE. So in a nutshell, we can say that JWT is an umbrella term, and it there are two main implementations of that, or there are only two implementations of that. One is JSON Web Signature, and another one is JSON Web Encryption. So in this, what do you say? In this talk, I'm just going to talk about JWS, and I think if you look at the JWT pronunciation, so JWT is Jot. This can be Joss, and this can be Joe. I've not verified that, but that is something I'll leave up to you. I'll be calling them JWT, JWS, and JWT for the rest of this video. So we will be looking at implementations because the thing is, this is just an overview of both of these implementations and how does it work for both of them as well. So one example that I'm going to talk about in JWS. So I'm not going to show you any examples of JWT because it requires using a lot of keys. So it's you have a lot of encryption. And when I want to talk about JWE, I think there should be a dedicated session for that. JWS is easier to explain. The only difference is that when I look at this structure, this thing is encrypted in JWE. This thing is not encrypted in JWS. And the format is a bit different as well. Yeah, I have three working codes for these different things, which I have uploaded in a GitHub repository along with the slides as well. So I'll show you that and I'll give you the demos for all these things as well. So the first thing to understand JWT, I'm going to this website, which is jwt.io. This website actually shows you JWS. This is not JWT, it's JWS. So the few things that you see here is an algorithm. This algorithm is defined by another RFC 7518, which is for JSON Web Algorithms. Now, this actually defines what kind of hashing or cryptographic algorithms you're using. So coming back to this thing, my JWS has primary two headers or two parts. One is the header, which is called Jose. The second thing is the payload, which is called JSON Web. Okay, this is called JWT claims. I should have written it somewhere here as well. I think I have not written it here. So minimum you have to have two parts. One is a Jose header, JOSA. I can show it to you here as well. So one thing, okay, they have not mentioned it here. I'll just leave it. So this header is called a Jose header. I'll add it to the slides, which will be present in the GitHub repository. And this thing is known as JWT claims. So in this part, I'll talk about what do I want to claim. So the first thing that you want to claim about might be username. So my username is Faiz. Okay, it is FMK, Faiz Muhammad Khan. And I can actually put something which a lot of people do not like to put here. And I can mention my role as admin. So a lot of people, they do not like to put this on JWS, which I'll talk in the end as well. That but this helps in a lot of different things. I'll just wait here. When I'm showing you the demo, I'll explain why I have put the role thing here as well. So the first claim I'm trying to use is username. If I have another claims that I want to claim, like if I want to transfer other data as well, like if I want to transfer the thing as age, what is my age? My age is 28, so I can put it that over here as well, and I can put different things as well. So what we are trying to do is, if we go back to the RESTful definition, okay, it's not here, it's I think here. It says all of the data that the server should use should come from client. Okay, all of the information necessary to understand the request should come from the client. So if I mention everything, most of the things about myself in the JWT itself, then I can pass this JWT to my browser. My browser will store it and send it back to the server, and the server will extract this JWT. It will know that I have a username which is FMK, my age is 28, or any other thing as well. Normally, I just need these things, or rather than FMK, I can have like ID as well. So if I go back here in this thing, now if I create a JWT which can be verified cryptographically, if I send this token back to my client, when my client sends it to another microservice, my microservice doesn't need to talk to the user service because of the things that we'll talk just now. And it can send this thing to my microservice too, which is not sending any data to user service. And depending on this data, it can perform all the other interactions or actions it needs. So with JWT, not only I'm verifying or authenticating myself, but I'm also giving data about myself, which was normally stored in the database in the sessions part. So is this clear that through JWT, I can send data about myself through the token itself? Okay, by the way, this is not JWT, this is JWT. So coming back to this thing, this is a Jose header. It also has multiple things. The algorithm, you can actually, okay, you can actually remove all of these things as well. But I have not experimented if I want to put it here as well. If I remove that, if I remove this, it's still a valid JWT. But a lot of people, they like to do it. I do not know why. Also, you can remove this algorithm as well, but I do not want to keep it empty. So I just type these things here. The use of this header, which is JWT, oh sorry, the type thing, is that my JWT actually supports normal data as well. Like, hello, this is giving me an error, but this is a valid thing. And here, I do not know if this is the right thing. I can write text or something like that as well. If I put text, I can, rather than a JSON data, I can write a text data as well. So currently, I'll put it back to JWT. Normally, I would not recommend these things to be on the client because your server should already know what it is dealing with. If you are having multiple algorithms, you can put it as well. But the thing is, this algorithm is used on the server. So why do you want to send it to the client? That is one more thing. But let's just leave it over there. So this is my user header. This is my payload. So what JWT does is it has minimum two parts. So what it does, it actually removes all the unnecessary spaces and all the unnecessary carriage returns. It converts this into something like this format. I think this and that. It converts it into this string, and then base 64 encodes it and puts it over here. So if I try to base 64 decode the first part, And if I put it here, you can see that it has the same thing. Okay, it also removed all the other things as well. So what this algorithm is doing is it making it into this part just to remove unwanted data and removing all the spaces as well, and etc etc, and then converting into a base 64 thing. Similarly, my this thing has it has removed all the unnecessary spaces and converted into a base 64 part. If I set the algorithm as none, then my JWT will only have two parts. By the way, if it's a JWS or JWE, everything is defined using these things. So when you read the documentations, I think they should have written like something like JWS here or JWE here, but they have not done it. So you have that thing. So depending on the types of headers you have, it is interpreted as a JWT or JWE. Currently, what we are using is valid headers for JWS, and we are using that currently. And this is not a JWT. So coming back to this thing, if I remove my algorithm, it will only have two parts. It will not have multiple parts as well. So what happens is that the third part, for the verification part, what my server does is it takes these two things, and depending on my algorithm, it will hash that thing. In my JWS, it will hash it. In my JWE, it will encrypt it. So currently I'm using JWS, and using this secret key, which I mentioned here, it's hashing this thing, as you can see here, and it's hashing it, and the output, it's again converting it to a base 64 encoded value, and it's attaching it to the last part. So this is what my JWT token looks like. So the first part is the base 64 encoded value of my Jose header. Second part is the base 64 encoded value of my JWT claims. And the third part is a hash of this thing, which is again base 64 encoded. Now what happens is that one thing that I like to say, okay, just look at this thing. Look at the last part. If I write secret 1, it changes completely. If I write FMK1 instead of FMK, you can see that it changes completely again. So the thing is, if I have a little bit of change in my thing, not including spaces which are outside the double quotes, my signature will change very drastically. So what happens is that when I transfer this JWT, if I give it to the browser and my browser give it back to the server, what will happen on the server? It will take this JWT. Now, this is something that we are not transmitting to the client. As you can see, this thing will only be used on the server to compute a token. It will not be sent to the client. So what will happen is that when I send it to the client and the client sends it back to me, the server will take this and it will have a secret key. It will have a secret key stored on the server. So to be honest, all my microservices will have that secret key. There's a software called Vault, and there's a software called Notary as well. And I think AWS KMS might do that thing, but I am not sure. So Vault and Notary, they are the softwares required to keep this secret updated on all my microservices. So all my microservices, they share the same secret key. So in my microservice 2, when it receives this token, what it will do is it will write secret 1 here. Okay, let me just do one thing. I'll copy this thing. I'll put it in a notepad. So this is my DLBT token. Now on my server, if I write secret 1 and I paste it here, then you can see that's an invalid signature. The thing is, you will not be doing these manual things manually. There are a lot of libraries that will do this and give you the same output. So what happens is that when JWT.io received my JWT, it actually took these things. It knows a secret which is secret 1. It tries to hash this thing with secret 1, and it tries to match it with the base 64 decoded value of this thing. Now, if it doesn't matches, then it's an invalid signature. So I can say that if my client sends a token to the API gateway to the microservice 2, if using the secret, if my microservice 2 gets an invalid secret and signature, then my microservice 2 can say that it's an invalidated, it's a invalid token. If it was a valid token using secret 1, then the microservice 2 will say that it has been violated. Okay, user does not do it. It's managed by the people who have implemented this architecture. The developers will have to securely put it in all the microservices, and you will not send it to the client. It will always be in all of the microservices. Now, it is a very complex thing to understand that how all my microservices will have the same secret and how will they update it. So if you look at 12-factor app, or if you look at what do you say, Vault, that software allows you to do it in a very better manner, but it still has a lot of overheads. So you will put a software called Vault. It will convey that secret to all of your microservices. So all of your microservices will have the same secret at the same time. Now the thing is, what we have seen here is that is it clear, understood by everyone? Shiraz, did you understand it? Like how my server is validating or like authenticating my user?
Yes, sort of understood it.
Yeah.
Not
So
completely though.
okay, server has a secret key. Server receives a JSON token.
Hmm.
Okay, I'll just put this token again here, because if you see that when I make my secret again, this whole thing changes. So
Okay.
this is the thing that my client has given to the server. The server knows a secret key, secret one. So what it will do is it will take this thing, it will compute a hash using this secret key. Now it has calculated a hash, it has base64 encoded it. Now it knows that this thing was, if it was sent by my user service, which knows the same secret key, so my user service would have used the same secret key to compute this hash. Now, if this thing, which is coming from my user or my client, if it is received on the server and it say
Hmm.
it has, like if my user says that it has received it from the user microservice, then this should match what my microservice is computing as well, right?
Yes. Hmm.
So the thing is, what my server does is it takes the Jose header and the payload from here, it computes a hash, and it tries to match it with this hash. If it doesn't match, my user it was not computed using this secret key, and the user is trying to do something else as well, right? Or
Yeah.
it was created using a different secret key. Now, if I go back here, if my user service and my microservice have the same key, then if whatever the token my user microservice gives to my client will actually have a valid hash. So this is how you validate it, and this is how you send claims that are verified. Now the benefit of this thing is that when my client, okay, my server will give a set of claims that my server has verified. So it will give a claims for verified identity to my client, and my microservice too can actually trust this without having a need to contact my user service again, and get the verified identity of what the client is. Okay, is this clear? I think,
Yeah, it is clear.
yeah. Okay, what happened? All right, so I shifted here. So what I'm going to do is now we are going to look at a demo rather than this thing. I have 3 demos here. I think I should create another window. Never mind. I'll just put Postman up. So you can find my code on the GitHub repository. I think, let me get the GitHub repository again. So this folder has been uploaded to the GitHub repository. Shiraz, is this properly visible to you? I have a like really good high resolution monitor, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, it is visible. It is clearly visible to me.
Or if you
You
want,
can
like,
zoom in, like you can make the text a bit bigger, and that would be fine for everyone, I guess.
this is good.
Let me check on YouTube. Yeah, it's good.
Okay, stick to Zoom level 3. If someone wants, they can add something else as well. Okay. So this is the link. that I posted in the GitHub repo in the YouTube channel. Okay, why is it not being there? Shiraz, can you see my comment on the YouTube channel? Hello?
Yes, as I was muted. Sorry. I
Can you
can't
see
see
my
your
comment?
comment on the. No, I cannot see your comment on the chat right now.
Why is it that way?
I can't see it.
Sorry. Let's post it again. Let's see. Can you see it now? No, I cannot see it.
It actually takes a second to pop
No,
up.
no, I have two windows. I've done it way before. So I'll just send it to you. So just post it over there. I think different channels cannot post it over there. So Shiraz, I've sent you a message that you can see. Can you see it?
Yes, I can post it now.
Just post it over there. Yeah. All right. So this is a GitHub repository. It has 3 sample demo codes. Okay. The first code is similar to what we see here in JWT.io. So we'll send a request. Okay. So Shiraz has done that. You can go to that GitHub repository and you can just do something like, if you have npm, you can install something known as uh, dgit. So what dgit does is it downloads this whole thing on the GitHub repository as what a wcat would do. So it downloads your thing. The client is not sending the secret right now. What I'm showing it to you here, it's bad. So I showed you the same thing, that this is my server now. Now, I think you missed my point here. So what I was doing is I was using this as a way to explain it as like a server. So this is my server. So my server has sent that JWT and it has been sent here. So I've saved it here.
Why we can't? I can't see your screen properly. Like that notepad was not visible, so that smaller of a text uh, is, is hard to see.
Okay. Now what I've done is I've just copied and pasted this JSON thing. So what's happening? The first case scenario, open up your code. No. Okay. That's one thing. Second thing is something else. So here we have the secret here in the second code. And the third, we have the secret here as well. So just let me explain what the code is. So yeah, okay. Let me get back to the thing. So the first thing, what I'm showing you is the JSON web token library, which again, okay, if you want to look at the libraries which JWT has, if you go to jwt.io, in the bottom of the page, they show you all the libraries for like for .NET. This thing. No, that's only an app one. So I have 3 projects here. To make it easier for you, I've created 3 projects. The second project, the secret is not being passed by the user.
Faiz bhai, actually, maybe it will get bit confusing if you keep answering someone else's question. First, maybe you can present it and then he can ask
Yeah, I
questions
think
and you
I'll do
can
that.
answer it. So we
Yeah,
can
okay.
understand.
So if you want to look at the different JSON libraries that are available, you can go to JWT.io. So it has like these are the libraries for .NET. There are libraries for Python. There are libraries for Node.js. By the way, JWT.io is by Auth0. So Auth0 has a really good framework for doing all the things as well. So one of their sub libraries, JSON Web Token, which we are using. JWT.io is by Auth0, and this library is by Auth0 as well. So that's why you can see it here. So if you want to install it, okay, I can just show it here. So in my package.json, I am using Nodebond to hot reload. I'm using Express and I'm using JSON Web Tokens. So in this project, what I'm doing is I have come up with 3 dummy applications. Let's look at the first. Okay, before that, I was just looking at this. Actually, responding to the chat made me forget it. So there's a really good tool which is you can install globally, which is dgit. So when you use dgit, you can just I can say make dir test. Inside this test directory, I can write dgit ghost 0x07 and null bpl jwt. I think that's the library. When I do this inside this test directory, you will see that it has downloaded all the files, but it has not created that as a Git repository. So if you do not want the Git features, or if you do not want to get involved with the submodules things and etc., you can use dgit. So it doesn't clone a Git repository; it downloads a Git repository as it would have downloaded a folder. So this is something I use very extensively. So you can use it as well for this thing. Now coming back to this thing, I have in my package.json, as you can see, my npm start is mapped to nodemon app.js. So when I write npm run or npm start, it will start my app.js. Currently, my app.js is not connected to app1.js and app2.js. The thing is, these are three different separate codes. In the first code, I'm just trying to demonstrate how this JSON Web Token works, how this library works. And I'm trying to do it in the same way as JWT.io, because in JWT.io, I, as a client, am also sending the secret. So if I'm using the secret here, I can just see what the JWT will be. So this thing is for testing purposes. Now, this is just the boilerplate for Express. The code is here. So I have made a I have made a route which is JWT. In that, I want to send two things. One is a payload and one is a secret. So this library is very easy to use. As you can see, I can just write jwt.sign. What is my payload, which is my this data or my claims, then the secret key, and then the other things which I want to put in my header thing. By default, this library will create these headers. So I do not need to go and write these headers. I do not need to go and do this thing. I just need to provide this library with a payload, and my library will create the whole thing. And the library also needs a secret. So what I'm doing here is, let me just remove that part. So I'm passing to my jwt.sign a payload and a secret. So if I run this server, npm start, okay, what happened? Oh, sorry, I'm in a bad place. Npm start. So this is an application running here. Now I'll go to Postman just to see how this library works. Let's see if this is still readable. So I have a route which is JWT. It requests a thing, and I have to send it a body. Okay, this is something else. So if you're not aware that if I want to send a JSON thing, I'll have to come here. I'll have to click on raw, and I have to select this as JSON. So currently it needs two things. One is payload. So my payload is the claims that I want to send. Can you just stop right now? Just wait and wait for the thing to end. So in the payload, I can have different claims that I want. So the thing is, I can have a claim like username, and I can have a username like fmk3249 or something like that. And I can have something like, you say, role as admin. So when I have this thing, I have a payload. Now this library, just what it does is I'm taking a payload from this body. I'm sending the payload here, and I'm using the secret key to get me a JWT thing. So what I'll do is I'll just see how the library works. And the second thing I want is secret. So I have secret here, and secret can be secret here. We can use the same thing. When I send the post thing, it replies back to me with a token, which is this thing. If I use this token back in my thing, and if I paste it, you can see, okay, you can see that there's a new thing which I didn't say, which is IAT. This library is using that IAT and adding it to my payload as well. And it can add a lot of different things as well. So my payload was FMK3249 and the user role thing, which you can see has been very easily added to my JWT. So I guess this is very easy to use. So this was my first thing, that I just have to use this JWT.sign. It has one more thing, which is the asynchronous way. But for the sake of a basic thing, or like a small, what do you say, like to make it easier to understand, I'm using the synchronous way. To make it asynchronous, you just add a function here, a callback function here. So whenever the token has been created or done, it will use that again as well. So this was the first thing that I wanted to show. Let's just remove this. Second code that I want to show is, okay. One more thing I can do is I can write another things here as well. So expires in, if I use something like 1 hour here, so it will add a header here. Just run it again. So not this thing. Let me just do this. Okay. So if I calculate this token again, if I copy this and paste it here, and I paste it here, you can see that I have an expiry thing here as well. So these are seconds from the epoch time, which is like the normal thing that people use. So the seconds that have been passed since 1970 January 1 0 0 0 0. As you can see that 1 hour has been added to it. So what happens is that if I come back to this JWT token after 1 hour, my library will call it as an invalid token. So this is one way that my library uses it, this expiration thing or internally, that if my current time is greater than the expiration time, this JSON token becomes invalid. Now that's the only thing I wanted to talk about in this thing. I'll just close this. I will go back to my package.json and I'll switch it to app1.js. Now app1.js is a different code. In this, what I'm doing is I'm trying to mimic username and password thing. So in username and password thing, if I give it the right username and password, it will give me a claim and it will send it to me as well. So the code has a few differences. Currently, we were just trying to use that. So we were trying to see for experimental purposes, like I do not want to go to jwt.io again. So I was passing secret to this code, but this is not something that I have to do. The server has to have it. So I have a variable here, which is secret. Normally you want to take it from the environment variable, which is process.env and secret, and your vault pushes that into your environment variable or something like that. But currently we do not want to go deep into that, so we are just using secret here. Now as you can see, I have jwt.sign here as well. In this, I will, like, what do you say, use this as a payload and sign it using the secret key and put in the another payload or the named, what do you say, claim, which is expires in, and I'll send it back. If my credentials are not valid, it will just send that it's invalid credentials. So I will start the service again. Currently I'll just say it's better to say it app1. So app1 is running at this thing. Now if I go back here, the structure has changed. For this application, I have to send two things, username and password. So it has to be the same thing as well. So if I write username here, and if I give it the value of the right one, fmk, and if I write password here, which I just write it as secure pass, and if I send this request, okay, cannot post JWT because the path here is, wait, oh, login. Firstly, these were all part of the single application, but I made them in a different way. So if I give the right username and password, it gets me the right thing. If I do not give it, it gives me a wrong thing. So if I'm just doing that, if I use username and password, it gives me a token. And if I go and see the token here and paste it here, you can see that it's because I'm using the same secret here. The signature has been verified. The username is FMK and the role is admin. So I can do one more thing. I can just give it a unique ID as well, 123 or something like that, or any internal identity ID. The thing is, this is not supposed to be the same as this thing. The thing is, whatever claims that you want to pass, the server will have the complete right to actually send whatever the claims that it wants to be in the JWT. My user cannot add any claims. If my user is like, if it was something else, and if I use it like a normal user, you can see the complete thing changes. Nobody can modify it. Only my server sends that this is an admin role, and this is the different things as well. If I come back here, this is a demonstration of how to do it. The other things are express related. You can see it in the GitHub repository. I don't think you got blocked, but I do not know like what happened there. So this is the second example. I think that's a production thing. Like we are doing this for the first time as well. So coming back here, this is a second sample application. Another disclaimer: this is not something which you do in production. This is for just explanatory purposes. So I'm trying to explain how a user authentication works. If the username and password are right, that my server has a choice. It can take this out from it any database. It can use any database that is connected to that. It can add any number of things that my server wants other microservices to know. So the server will sign it and nobody can forge it back again because the secret is only known with the server. If any other microservice wants to verify this, they should know this secret as well. All right. Is this kind of clear to everyone, or is it going over your head? Shiraz, like you are my skateboard for this thing. Is this clear?
Yeah, it is clear.
Yeah. The one good benefit that we have, and the one reason that I'm moving really fast, is that it will be a recorded video. So you can see it again. If I go too fast, you can just go back to this video, pause it, and do other things as well. Now, the third thing that I want to show is app3.js, app2.js. Uh, okay, Vault is, I can do that, but the boilerplate to teach Vault is pretty much complex, and I will come back to that thing here. I can just show you the slide. That the problem with microservices is that it, and JWT and other things as well, is that you have to learn a lot of things. If we look at the crowd here in Null Bhopal, it will definitely go over their head. But I can keep a session afterwards. I can put a different video, a lot of videos on how do you create microservices. When it's clear with them, I'll put a prerequisite, and depending on that, we can use Vault as well. So we can do it later down the line, but not in like 1 or 2 months, because these other people, they need to learn a lot of things before they can actually understand why do you actually need to use Vault.
Yeah, and
Now,
this is a 101 session, so the point is to get
sorry,
up from him. This is
yeah,
a
it's 101
101. Yeah.
exactly. So the third example app that I want to show you, again, I would like to say that this is not something that, okay, for a production system, you'll add a lot of different things as well. This is just for an explanatory purposes. So in app 2, this remains the same. What I've added is I've added two things, or I've added three things. One is an authenticated route, and one is an admin route. Just to be lazy, I have made both of them as post, not as get. So these are again just for demonstration purposes. Like if you look at a production thing, you'll use these libraries in a way different manner, but that's totally up to you. So this thing I've copied from online because I was running out of time. Yeah.
Faiz bhai, it will be awesome if you could share a production sort of code that, like, if we can see an example of a production code instead.
I have some production codes, but that are for a few clients, which I cannot
Yeah.
show. So I have not some. I do not have production codes which are for demos.
Hmm.
That's what I want to show. Uh, and
It's
the
okay
thing
if you
is,
don't have it right now, but like later after the session, if you can share it, it will be cool.
yeah. Afterwards, I can give you a link in the Null Bhopal thing. So,
Okay.
anyways, I'm going to create a whole session on my whole series on microservices. So that will come like take on JWT as well. But a problem with a production based thing is that you run it in Docker containers. You have to run multiple applications, and
Yeah.
when you're transiting that thing, it goes over the head of a lot of different people. What we
Okay.
can do is we can have JWT 2 or 1 afterwards, in which I can add JWE as well, and we in which we can see a bit more of a production thing, and you can see how
Okay.
you need to learn Express for that. If
Yes.
I can show you another, I can do another session, but if you do not know Express, then it will go over your head. Or also the production things I have are in Spring Boot, not in Express. Clients really do not like this. They all like Spring Boot for some reason. So, anyways, this is something which I copied online because I liked his what do you say, comments. Like I could have written something different from here, but his comments are really good and it will help you like reflect back as well. So this is from Privacy Media, I guess. He posted a blog post or something where I okay, so I learned all these things from Udemy courses, and I had a notes thing where I have pasted everything. So I'm taking it back from there. So this is not something which I've written. I have written other things just to give credit to the actual author. So what I have here is normally what happens is what we see here. I think this is the thing. So when my client is sending a request, I told you that it either stores it in a cookie or in a local storage. The thing is, you can set your JWT in a cookie as well. But normal thing is in your front end platform, you actually intercept this token. So when I do login, it will take the JWT, it will store it in the local storage, and it will use the React framework, which has multiple, or the, I think there's a framework called AuthGuard and a lot of different libraries which can take it out from a local storage and put it in a authorization header. So normally what you would want to do is for your requests, you will have a header which is authorization, and you will have a bearer token here, bearer thing, and there you will have your JWT. So what the code does here is it takes, what do you say, what do you say? It takes the authorization header from request.header method. It extracts the authorization header. And now in this header, you have bearer, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 places, and then the JWT thing. So firstly, we are checking if the bearer, if there is actually a bearer header. If okay, he has done something else. Spring Boot, we actually I did not know the thing, so I was actually extracting the strings. So what he has done, he has split it using space, and the other part of the space is the bearer thing. So I recently wrote this whole code in Spring Boot, and I did not know the library of that because I do not work in Spring Boot, but my clients, they wanted it in Spring Boot. So I took 7 places out and I did that. Now when we take the bearer thing, it okay. Then what it does, if the bearer is right, then it goes to the next middleware. Okay, I think I might have missed something here. Wait, let me see if this code is proper one. Wait, takes this thing. If the bearer header is invalid, it sends a forbidden thing. Okay, yeah. So what this middleware is doing, it's not actually verifying token. What it's doing is it's taking out, extracting the token from my HTTP header. So I actually use the same name. So this is extraction of token rather than verified token, because I'm not verifying the token here as well. So what I'm doing is this is the same login thing. Now let me show you. Okay, I'll just wait. Now I have this authenticated thing. What this does is, first middleware that I get is this one. Yeah, exactly. So the thing is, I have given the name of verified token here. So I was just confused, like it's not verifying anything here. So it's just extracting this thing. Some of these code I've written like a few months back, so I'm not pretty up to date on that. So this is something I've written. So it's just extracting this thing. Now, when it extracts the header, it sends it to this thing as request dot what do you say? It's passing it into the request dot token value. So what's happening here is when I go to authenticated, it takes the request, it passes it to verified token. Verified token extracts my token from the header, and it passes this to my actual code or my callback function. In that callback function, I'm using another thing. This is another, I think I've used asynchronous code here. Okay. Okay. So the thing is, here I'm using synchronous part. There's also a synchronous part here. And here I'm using a synchronous code. this is a problem that I have written a lot of different codes, and I just copied it and pasted it here and modified according to you. So the thing is, this is an asynchronous code, which is again from the same library, and it's verifying my token. So the first thing it takes, similarly, the claims or the complete token that I have, it takes a complete token, which includes everything. So this token includes all of these three things and all of that. Now it needs a secret key, which I have defined here. Now using that secret key, by the way, the secret key is same here and secret key is same over there. So now it has a token and it has a secret key. It's not using anything else. Now if there's any error, it will execute. Okay, I have not written an error code. Okay, if there's an error, it will send a forbidden thing. It's not describing a thing. I think I'll just write console.log an error just to show you what the error is. And what it will do is I have made a variable which is identity. You can call it any variable you want. So you can call it claims as well. I'm just using it identity because I was most focused on identity. So what this function will do, it will take the complete token, try to verify using the secret key. If it's verified and validated, then it will extract the claim from this token and pass it to the identity variable. Now, this identity variable, we can use it to actually see what's happening. But currently, I'm just showing you what the identity variable is as well. Let me go back to my package.json and let me modify it to arc2.js. So I'm running this thing again. Postman here. Now this path is authenticated. First, let me get a token. I got a token. I'm just copying it right now. Now I'll go to another thing, which is HTTP localhost. I think we are, it's a 1.5 hour session now. It's like a 1 hour session now. Sorry for that. I didn't expect it to go this long. And there's the authenticated part. Now in the authenticated part, it's, even though it's a post request, it's not accepting anything. So I can just send it in random body or an empty body. So when I send the request to this authenticated part, okay, let me just make it get, man. Like I do not like this. So if I send get, you can see that if I try to go to the authenticated part, it's not allowing me access. So only if my JWT was valid, it would have allowed me access to this path. Now I can go to headers. I can create a new header and I can write the value as bearer and the token. Now if I send the request again, problem here, this authenticated. Let me just use this same code. Role admin, valid credentials, FMK secure pass. It's giving me a token. We are using the same key right now. This is something that I've faced in Spring Boot as well. That sometimes when you, I do not know, like I've never been able to troubleshoot it. So when I'm writing a code, most of the time, even though if you have the same key, sometimes recompiling the code and using the key again solves the issue. Let's see if that works. This is pretty strange. Wait. It was working when 5 minutes before I was trying to go into the session. To be honest, identity, we are not just doing any identity. Secret is a secret thing, I think. This is pretty strange. So the thing is, like when I was testing it right before this thing, it was working and it was giving me everything else as well. Let's try the admin route. Let's just.
Faiz bhai, Abhishek is saying the name should be authorization. Maybe try that.
Oh, sorry, I did it wrong. Sorry, that's the problem. It's like I have been awake for like 40 hours now. Sorry about that. So yeah, it works. Thank you, Abhishek. So if I use the correct header, it's showing me this thing, right? Now, one problem, one security issue that we have with JWT in general is that if I have a secret key, you can see that here I have mentioned a username and role, FMK, and a role as admin. Now, if I know the same secret key, and if I go back here, if I write it as Shiraz, and I write it as admin, and I use the same thing, if I copy this and if I pass it back, this is pretty strange with Postman. And if I add it, you can see that my microservice has successfully authenticated Shiraz. But was it in my login page? No, right? So this is one problem, that you have to protect your secrets a lot, and you should not write secret here. You should give a very complex value here, like primarily something that comes out from keypass or something. Randomly generated hex characters are the best things for secret, because if you remove the secret, then it's a big problem. Let me check one more thing. If the issue is still here, if I write algorithm as none, it doesn't work here. So normally what used to happen, if I write Shiraz and if I write none here in algorithm, so a lot of badly written libraries, they do not try to calculate the hash. So what used to happen is that if I write Shiraz or anything and I write the algorithm is none, a lot of poorly written libraries, they will actually authenticate that guy as well. So without having the secret, that is another issue that is with JWT and poorly written JWT implementations as well.
This
So
is
if you want to,
actually,
yeah. Okay, Shiraz, let me complete one more thing. Then we are done with this session.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the third thing that I have here is admin thing. So here we are allowing access to anyone who has a valid JWT. But the thing is, when you are producing JWTs, you will have a valid JWT for a user as well and for an admin as well. So to segregate those roles and to actually implement more access controls, what I've done is I have added another thing in this JWT, which is role. So when you're working with microservices, it's very hard to transfer the role. Because the thing is, in a lot of microservices framework, you have to re-authenticate the user and you have to give the role that it has. And depending on the role, rather than the username, you have to provide access controls. So Jace, something like role and admin, this is something that you pass to different microservices. And depending on this value, the microservices, they implement access controls. Now, if I come back here, this is an example of that. So the first thing remains the same as that. And in the second part, what I'm doing is I'm comparing if the admin.role is admin. If it's admin, I'm welcoming admin, and otherwise I'm giving forbidden. So the thing is, if with the same thing, okay, let's make it get again. Get again. It's not a lot of different things to do. So let's go to HTTP admin. If I send a request, it gives me forbidden. One more thing is that when you're creating RESTful APIs, this should come back as a JSON as well, which I've not done it here just to save my time. If I put my authorization header here and I write bearer, paste it here, and if I send it, you'll see that welcome admin. I will just write something else here. Identity dot what is this? The other part is username. Okay. I'm working with Dart these days, thanks to Shiraz. So Dart accepts that thing, not this one. The admin. So if I do this, even though Shiraz was not in the database, you can see it says Shiraz the admin. Now, if I go here to make my things easier, if I just, okay, let me just paste the JWT here. If I write it as user using the same encryption key, if I copy this again, and if I send it, by the way, whoever feels this is fast, this video will be on YouTube. You can just pause it and see what I did over there. The only thing that I did is I created a JWT in which I made Shiraz user rather than that thing. So if I pass this token, you can see it's forbidden. If using the same bearer, if I go to authenticate it, it will welcome him, but it will not allow him to go to admin. Okay, this was the practical part. Just note down your questions. I'll just finish whatever is left in the theory and then we'll move on. So the biggest thing is I did not have time to put this slide up. So if you want to work with microservices as well, there's a one thing which has been like this is one really great article by Martin Fowler, which says how tall are you. So the thing is when you want to implement JWT, for example, if I have like there are a lot of things that you have to do. You have to share secrets. You have to put a vault. You have to uh, pass on the keys to different microservices. You have to authenticate in that microservice things as well. If one key gets compromised, you will have to change the secret again, and all the different tokens will get compromised as well. So you have to do a lot of things to make JWT work. So is it really worth this effort? So this article, it says something about a microservices architecture. It says if you do not know certain things, it's good to stick with a monolithic architecture. Now, if I go back to a monolithic architecture, do you think JWTs are a good thing for monolithic architecture, or should I stick to session-based things? If I have monolithic architecture, if I have a single application which does everything and which does not have internal APIs, which one do you think is better, JWT or session-based authentication? Shiraz, you can say like you are my guinea pig right now. Okay, I will give you the answer. Can you guys hear me? Actually, hello, hello. Yeah, yeah. Okay, I thought like I got nobody was replying. I think Shiraz has gone somewhere as well. So sessions are better thing. That's a normal thing. So if you do not, the biggest drawback of JWT is there's a lot of things to understand and a lot of things to implement, and you have to. Okay, the thing is, in Node you have a really good library. When I was working at Spring Boot, they have good libraries for OAuth when they're dealing with JWT. But when you have to manually implement this part, which we have done seamlessly with Node.js, it's currently a big hell in Spring Boot. So what we have done here in the JWT.verify and JWT, okay, this thing is it's a nightmare to write in Spring Boot. So you have to create a new file, you have to create a filter, you have to create an interceptor proxy, you have to take that interceptor proxy, you have to extract the header, then you have to send it back forward, and then you have to manually authenticate as well. So this is why I chose Express to do that. In a lot of libraries, it's very hard. Node and Express and any libraries that Auth0 has created or Passport has created, so are very easy to understand. So again, I'll just put on the things as well. So the biggest problem with JWT is you have a lot of learning curve. Express, Auth0, and what do you say? JSON Web Token libraries are very easy to use. If you are stuck in a language which does not have a proper library, you have to do a lot of things which they are doing it here for you very easily. So another thing that are the bad parts of JWT is security consideration. The thing that we are not seeing here is the logout feature. So in the logout feature, if you have a session-based architecture, you just remove the token, you just remove the session ID from the DB and everything happens here. When you want to log something out, can you actually log out something which is stored on the client? Like if I want to log out from all the devices, right? If I want to have a thing like Facebook has this feature that log out from all devices. So what Facebook does is it invalidates that session ID. When you invalidate that session ID, you're automatically logged out from all the places. But currently, we are not keeping a store of all the JWT that we have done. and we are sending it to a client. So logout becomes hard. To actually implement logout, people have come up this way that they create another microservice which stores all the invalidated tokens. So what happens is whenever you click on logout, that data goes on invalidated token, which is still in the expiration time, because your tokens, they will automatically invalidate after the expiration time has been over. But if it's still in the expiration time, it goes in another microservice. All my microservice will connect to that microservice just to see if that token is on the list of invalidated tokens or not. Other thing is that if a key has been, like, if you want to invalidate a token, another thing you can do is change the key, but it will log everyone out and it will invalidate all the JSON tokens that are out there. So this is a big problem. I do not want to go deep into that because this is something I discuss in Vault and other things as well. That when you change the secret, all your JWTs which you have made for in the past will be invalidated. And when you create a new secret key, or when you modify the secret key again as well, all of the previously generated JWT tokens, they become invalidated as well. So this is one thing that you have to see. Another thing that we have is passing secrets, which is a problem, and it's vulnerable to dictionary attacks. So this, in the case of JWT, normally what happens is that brute force attacks are prevented in other places. The thing is that I have a web application firewall in front of my login system, so people, they cannot brute force my login system and get a token out or something like that. But if my JWT gets logged in, the attacker has all the data, it has the clear text, it knows the algorithm, then it can run a brute force attack to find a secret key. And if it finds the secret key, it can log in as any person that I showed you. Like it can log in as any person in your application, and that's a help. So there are other things to do that as well. JWE is a good alternative, but the thing is, the biggest solution to that is write a very complex secret key rather than a normal secret key. So again, this was all. If something was really fast, just look back at the YouTube video and you will see it. I think we just have 5 minutes for questions and answers. So if you have any doubt or questions, you can just ask right now. Uh, you can ask your questions now. So this was it. Whatever I can say. I actually went over. I think I went over an hour. So yeah, you can quickly write your questions if you want, and I'll try to answer them. We have, I think, 5 more minutes for this. Anyone who has some questions?
Okay, okay. I was speaking and you couldn't hear me.
Okay.
So I have a question. So
Yeah.
when we do like we have after bearer we have a refresh token, right? The whole point of having a refresh token is to invalidate the earlier token that we had, that
Yeah.
JWT has generated. So
Yeah.
how is that? Like if we stop refreshing those tokens, isn't that a logout itself? Like naturally that you will get logged out of the application. Won't
Yeah.
that
You will.
happen?
Yeah, you will be. So there are multiple ways people have implemented. So the thing is, there's no standard industry accepted things. If I the all the people I've discussed this with, they are having a different architecture. So people have come up with different ideas on how to make a logout thing. So the thing that you told me is one of that thing. Some people are using what do you say? Again, when you talk about refresh tokens, I do not want to do this online because this is a basic thing as well. The thing here is, okay, I just do not want to talk a lot of things because I will have to explain a lot of things. The thing is, there are multiple ways in which people are invalidating and logging out people as well. The thing that you have pointed out is another way of logging out the previous things. Yeah, you can do that. But on the back end, you have to implement it in some manner. And it totally depends on how they are doing it on the back end. Does that clear your answer, Shiraz?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
so
The best. Yeah, go on.
best, there is another question. The best
Yeah.
place to store JWT on client side.
Local storage. So I do not know why people do not like cookies. So the thing is, I am not really good with what do you say front end frameworks. initially I was getting in Shiraz to actually create a React part for this application for the client. So the thing is, normally it's not good to send it on a cookie because cookie sends gets sent automatically. Rather send the JWT only where it's necessary. So I think in Angular you have a library called authguard, and I think auth0 works for the frontend library as well. Okay, before I end up, so there are two places. These are two frameworks which are like what do you say? A proper frameworks. Currently, we are using a library. This frameworks provides all the necessary things that you would want to do it, and it will make the things that we do even more easier. I think it's available for front end as well. I've not tried it out as well. There's AuthGuard. I think it's for only for Angular. So AuthGuard does that feature that it automatically stores it in the local storage, and it extracts that thing from the local storage, and only on the routes where the front end has deemed that you should send a JWT, Angular will only send it to those places as well. So the best place I would say it's local storage, because so if like if I want to do something like I want to add multiple fields here, if I want to add 10 more fields here, and some places you actually do add it there as well, then it becomes large for cookie. And I do not know if there's a limit on cookie, but sending it again in cookie, because if you put it on cookie, cookie is sent again and again. If you put it in a local storage, your front end can put up some routes, and only those at those routes your JWT will be sent to the server side. Is that clear, Perth? Any other questions?
Um, do you recommend some checklist for security testing of JWT specifically? Because I have an article in mind that I can share, but other than that, I don't think there are, like, I didn't find much good resources on how to test for security vulnerabilities in
Uh,
JWT.
I have few things in my mind, but those things they do not. Okay, most of the I do not have a security checklist, and I don't think if anyone has a security checklist, you might check OWASP top 10 API risks. Maybe they have something over there because
Actually, I'll share a link on Twitter or maybe in comment after looking it up. But there is a good article that have almost everything about JWT security.
yeah,
So like the person who just pointed out that that header was like he's a good developer on JWT, and Abhishek told me about that article, and it have almost all the specific vulnerabilities towards it, but I wanted to know if there is something more than that. So
no, I
that's why
have
I
few
asked.
things that I know work, but I have a very small sample size. Like I have worked only on like 4 or 5 applications where I've properly worked with JWT. All right. So the thing is, my sample size is very low, and most of them my JWT goes in training sessions as well. So the thing is, I know few things which might be the vulnerability, but I think if they are, I do not know if they are specific to that application or something like that. So I do not want to comment it right now because it might turn out wrong as well. So I'm just exploring that. Currently, I have a focus on something else. So I have paused JWT for some time. But when I come back, I'll just look into that thing and I'll share that in the Null Bhopal group. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Bhai.
Yeah.
One more question we have is it vulnerable to excesses? Which I think it is, because if we are storing it on local storage and we have a excesses on a site, then we can probably extract it in a request or something. Just like we take out
But who is
a
going to store
session.
the name? Who? Okay. Back. The thing is, like, it's pretty. I do not know because the thing is, okay. It depends. That's the answer. So the thing is, even if I got the username, do you see that I reuse that username?
Yeah, you didn't, but okay, but
Normally,
the
normally what
whole.
I do,
Hmm?
normally what I do is using that username, I try to write a MySQL query or something like select from users where username and password. You understand the query, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Equal to that. This returns a set, right? Then I
yeah.
extract the users which is returned from the set.
Hmm.
Okay. Now the thing is, if the username is already in the set, it actually goes back to the same thing. Like your whole website becomes vulnerable to that thing. Because
Yes.
if it's already stored in the SQL database, you can there are multiple places where you can extract data and put it into accesses. The other thing is normally you are not okay. Another
No,
thing
I'm
where it
I'm just talking about the local storage. You said you can store JWT in a local storage, and if it's not refreshing, like in the examples we saw, it was not really refresh. Like refresh token was there, right? But
no refresh token I didn't
no,
add.
no, it didn't. It was not there. So it was not refreshing. So if it is not refreshing and you are storing it on local storage, then I can pretty much extract it from the local storage and use it like impersonate your session, right?
Yeah, but that comes with all. So that totally depends on what you are storing in local storage, right? So my server is sending something which the client is storing in local storage, right? If I'm not sending back, or if I'm not reflecting back the user input, do
Yes.
you think it will go there? Like if I'm not
If,
sending any user input back, so
hmm,
if user does not have control of what's stored in the local storage, do you
hmm.
think it will be vulnerable to accesses? No, right?
Yeah, now at that point it depends because
Okay. One more thing that I have to see is I've not tried it out. If I look at the auth zero, it might make it accesses safe, because a lot of frameworks, they are actually sanitizing in these kind of things. So if you're using a framework, it's I think you should go and check it out if it's doing that or not. But if it's reflecting the input, then it will be vulnerable to that. And the other thing is, normally what I do is I extract the data, like whatever I send back is from the database. Now, if the hacker was able to put that into the database, he would be able to retrieve it as well. So that's
yeah,
another
it's
thing.
like and that's like second order injection, right?
Exactly.
If
Yeah.
you can put it in the database, you can, and database is not sanitizing it, then you can take it out and use it
Yeah. So there are
just as
multiple
it is.
places for that. Another thing is, it totally depends on where you are using this value. So
Hmm.
this identity can be used in my thing as well. So I can use the JWT to extract my name. Uh, it totally depends. Like it totally depends on the application. If you have an input, if you have a claim which has values from a XSS input,
Hmm.
then it might have. I've not tried it out. Maybe if someone knows that, like if the libraries are automatically sanitizing it, I cannot comment on that right now. So the
Yeah,
only thing is,
that
yeah,
that was the question, the whole question. If someone else have a question, you can ask it in the chat, and we will
I
close
think
in
let's move it to
2 minutes.
the Bhopal group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
So it's
we'll be
7:40
ending
already.
the stream for today, and the recording will be available on Nalbopal's official channel, and we'll share that in the group.
Yeah.
And if you have questions, you can ask Faizbhai in the group itself,
Yeah. One
in the
thing which I
WhatsApp
forgot.
group.
Any feedback? Like, did you like this session? Like, it's a very beginner-based session. It's just only making you aware about JSON, JWT things, but it will not allow you to actually create like production-ready things, because you still have a lot of things to learn as well. But did you guys
Yeah,
like the session? Was it a good?
I
Yeah.
I loved it actually
Okay.
because
All right.
I did know I implemented JWT as I told you before, but not in this car. Like I wanted to know the base. I like to know what's going underneath, and a lot of times I knew how to implement it, but I didn't know what's going on underneath things. So
Okay.
that was awesome.
Yeah. All right. So I'll add one more thing. I'll add. Okay. This is from 7515 to 7519. The thing is, there are a lot of things which I didn't cover in this thing because it was going over the thing. There's some registered claims, there are some public claim names and private claim names. They explained it in a very easy manner. So you can see expression is here. None of these are mandatory, but if you want to read what is the default or way in which the frameworks understand them, so you can just see the RFC 7519 and you can go over there as well. Right. So that was it. Thank you. Like I had to remove a lot of things in it because I thought like talked about a 45-minute session. I was just going to do the app one thing, not other things. And then I realized, okay, like let's add few more things and other things as well. So I had to remove a lot of things to add these things. but it was not a comprehensive session. I'll say that there are a lot of things that you will have to see. This is a really good thing that you should look at. And if you're working with npm or express, I would recommend you to look at JSON Web Tokens, the official GitHub repository, and auth0 as well. And there's one more thing, which is Passport. I've not tried Passport. I've tried auth0, but you can look at these frameworks as well for your further learning things. All right, so that was it. Thank you guys from my side. So on to Shiraz for the closing note. And it was nice being with you guys as well. So see you guys later. Bye.
Thank you, Faiz bhai. And now I'll be closing the chat. So, those of you guys who are not in the Null Bhopal group itself, then there is a Twitter handle Null Bhopal called Null Bhopal itself, and you @Null Bhopal is the Twitter handle. I'll type it in chat. You guys can go there and message us in that account, and we'll add you in if you are from Bhopal and if you are interested in contributing or being a part of the Null community. Then you can just message us and we'll add you. Uh, Other than that, I hope you guys like the session, and please go over to the WhatsApp group if you have any questions now. And the recording will be available after some time.
Also, you
Thank
can
you.
actually send me your questions on the Twitter handle. So
Yeah.
just add me on Twitter, send it over there. I normally take 2 business days to reply. So that's the only difference over there. So yeah, you can just post it over there as well. I'll try to reply within 2 business days, but try to reply. All right.
Uh, Faiz bhai, if you could give me your Twitter handle over in the message, I'll just post it in the chat so people can follow or have it for future reference if questions. Okay,
I
guys.
have.
So this is
Okay.
that's it, and this is the Twitter handle. And now I'm closing the chat. Bye bye. Have a nice day.